Intermediate mode is the third survival game mode in this game. Released on early May of 2024, the mode has gone over a lot of changes, which includes dialogue, the current version of which containing some bits of lore. We'll first start off listing down information from the dialogue in intermediate mode. I'll also be considering the older versions of the mode to be canon, as Professor V mentions that Patient Zero's virus is evolving pretty early on in the current wave structure, implying that we've already known about Patient Zero before, only now we're getting to know more about his background. Before I start, I'd like to say that we are very close to getting 1k subs on this channel, as we are on like 871 subs as of recording this video, probably. So it would help out a ton if you considered subscribing to this channel and liking this video, as well as listing down your thoughts in the comments down below. That's enough shameless promoting, let's start with the video. The mode starts pretty simple. It's just your standard mission that Commander goes on, sorta like the ones on easy mode, casual, and even story mode, clearing a large horde of zombies within the vicinity and getting out of there once it's fully dealt with. I should also point out that this mission is after the events of Null and Void, so Commander does appreciate having a quote-unquote normal mission, even with Dispatcher being, you know, away. Something odd eventually happens as the usual regular zombies started to look a bit more abnormal, which eventually results in Commander contacting Professor V for help regarding what they're up against. This is also the earliest appearance of Professor V in the survival modes. Don't worry though, you'll see her a lot more in the later modes, whether you like it or not. Professor V later on appears in the early game and tells us that the virus of Patient Zero is evolving. The fact that this virus does have a name does just tell us that the tedious organization already knows about him, which makes sense, as if the events of the previous iteration of intermediate mode is canon, then that means this is his second appearance going against us. The entire storyline is heavily fragmented, so I'm just trying my best to piece together a puzzle that has missing parts. Anyways, the rest of the early game is pretty standard, with the appearance of mini-bosses like the Ghoul and Living Experiments. Like I've said in the previous video, these enemies do have the appearance of patients and lab workers, as they're in gowns and lab coats, implying that some of them were patients used for experimentation. Then later on, when they ran out of patients, decided to use the doctors or scientists as test subjects. Professor V eventually returns as she made some discoveries after going through some old hidden files. There was a scientist called Dr. Hershaff who used to work at a local hospital, who was eventually fired as it was discovered that he was torturing his patients by experimenting on them. He was also a virologist who specialized in the studies of viruses that are as old as over 1,000 years old. These are research on cell replication, which eventually led him to formulate a healing technology which was used by TDS after it was confiscated, as they were afraid of the possibility of using these research studies. The tech relies on forcing damaged cells to repair and multiply. After Dr. Hershaff's license was revoked, he eventually went back to his hometown and continued his research in private, which coincidentally was also right around when the zombie outbreak happened. Professor V obviously connects the dots and realizes that Patient Zero and Dr. Hershaff are the exact same person. Nothing much happens after this, and when things start to escalate, Patient Zero makes his appearance. Patient Zero is, well, obviously a doctor, and even more obviously, the origin of the zombie apocalypse. He's an enhanced zombie, which makes him not too dangerous compared to something like the Molten Warlord and Fallen King, as they are of completely different beings outside of the infection. Patient Zero relies on doing the standard stomp and summoning ability, which also paired up with his gadgets which makes him slightly more threatening. He throws toxic gas at towers using his mutated right arm, and throws flask at the path to support any enemies that walk past it. He eventually reaches Rage mode, which activates his back syringes, causing him to be more enhanced and aggressive, making him more faster and have a slight health regen. He's an overall simple boss, but still something much more stronger compared to the Brute or Gravedigger. I think I've already mentioned this before in one of my older videos, but I think a recap of what Patient Zero does is a pretty good reminder. That's all for the mode, so now let's talk about Dr. Hershaff himself. These have already been mentioned in my video about the bosses, but let's delve a bit more deeper as to who he was as a person. We don't know a lot about his personality, other than he is obviously mentally deranged, as he used to experiment on his patients and eventually even his co-workers. His main intent is the complete total extermination. No, not you. Get out. main intent is the complete total extermination of the human race for its abuse towards the Earth itself. A good moral stance, but an obviously evil and despicable approach to solving the issue. Because it is obvious that with someone of his intellect, he could have created a way to solve or at least reduce the harm the environment experiences by a noticeable degree. But he would prefer a global outbreak that single-handedly caused the collapse of an entire civilization. He's not a neutral or a morally right character that you should sympathize for. He's a extremely horrible psychotic individual that should have never been given the ability to have this much knowledge and power to begin with. Earlier, I said Dr. Herrschaft was fired from his old job, then returned to his hometown. But what wasn't shown was that he eventually was hired by Oasis X Enterprise shortly after to continue his experiments with even more funding and manpower. His primary objective was to create Serum Zero. While its purpose was unclear, this was the cause of the entire global outbreak. My guess is that it was meant to be a strength-enhancing serum, but obviously was manipulated by Patient Zero to create zombies. Serum Zero utilized compounds like 00 and Rain. While it is unclear as to what they do, they acted as a glue that binded the entire serum together and acted as a vessel to have its effects spread all throughout an individual. Dr. Herrschaft couldn't figure out what third compound he needed to fully complete it, which in turn caused him to make multiple failed attempts at experiments which he eventually ran out of patients to experiment on. So he decided to use his fellow co-workers as lab rats instead. Obviously, all of his experiments were complete failures as they produced abnormalities that shouldn't occur, such as the failed experiment essentially having its lower half being completely slime-like, Reavers having some of their bones popping out of their body, and ghouls having some sort of warts and being extremely frail. All of these obviously being duds. Patient Zero did eventually find himself a God Cube shard. While its origin is unknown, he still did manage to get one regardless. Mixing it with the compounds 00 and Rain was a complete success as he was able to turn himself into an enhanced zombie with the perfected Serum Zero. It allowed him to also spread the virus onto other people. Its main method of spread is unknown, but given they're zombies, I'll assume it's transmittable with contact through something like saliva or other sources of DNA that could enter a victim's body through open wounds, sort of how zombies in fiction usually infect other people. If you probably noticed, you'd have realized that Patient Zero is unusually weaker compared to the other bosses that have a God Cube fragment. This is because that he used all of it on the serum, allowing it to infect other people. So pretty much, he used all of his God Cube fragments' influence on everyone on Earth to turn them into mindless zombies, rather than hyper-buffing himself only as an individual with the powers of a god. That's pretty much all that we know about him and this game mode. If you have any more details to share that I might have missed, or any speculations regarding the mode, then please do comment on this video as to what you think. That's all that I have to say for today's video. This was really fun to make, because Patient Zero is one of the more interesting lore in the game, as he is essentially the main culprit of the enemies we've been facing all the way back to the game's release back in 2019. If you like this video, please do consider dropping a sub, and do like the video and write a comment and say if this video is good or if it sucks, and anything is fine, as it'll help the channel out a ton. That's pretty much all that I have for you guys. See ya!